My name is Jay Hansen. I'm the chair of the Oregon State Mechanical Board, and I'm going to call this meeting to order on June 21st. Yep. Wednesday, June 21st, 2023 at 9:39. That's what I have. Nathan, would you please call the roll?
Chair Jay Hansen.
Present, virtually present.
Vice Chair Eric Fanning.
Present.
Walter Cottle.
Present.
Chris Miller.
Present.
Jed Sherman is excused. Ted Zook.
Present.
Kevin Duell.
Present.
Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathan. Approval of the agenda and our order of business. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda at this time? Seeing none, as the chair of the Oregon State Mechanical Board, I rule the agenda and order of business approved. Does anybody have any need to change the minutes from our last November 9th meeting?
I do have a change to propose. On page 2, part G, second paragraph, I propose to strike the last sentence. There's a statement about me being a football player, which is not true. I thought that the chair was making a joke at the time, but it's in the record.
I was.
I'd be a much older man if that was true.
How about we just add the chair as a jokester?
That works.
It's not true.
Okay.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I don't even know if we have to vote on that. Could we please make that change? Okay. Thank you, Kevin. The next meeting is going to be on September 13th of 2023 at our normally appointed time of 9:30. Moving on to some very sad news. We are going to be saying goodbye to Derek Frazier, who has resigned from the board, and I have a brief little statement in regards to Derek, who was a member of the mechanical board, or has been a member of the mechanical board following his confirmation to an unexpired first term that began on September 20th, 2012. He filled the seat of sheet metal and air conditioning installer. That term ended June 30th of 2016. Derek then applied for a second term, which did expire on June 30th, 2020. Derek remained active on the board until his formal retirement at Strymer Sheet Metal in February of 2023. Derek, you will be missed, and we celebrate you as you move into retirement. Okay, we're gonna move into public comment, and I am going to, none has been received at the time of the printing of this particular agenda, but Pierre, has anything come in since then?
Thank you, Chair Hansen, members of the board. My name is Pierre Sabat, Policy Analyst for the division. There's been no request for public comment, but we'll hold the line open for another minute in case there's someone here who didn't sign up but would like to make comment. So if you are here and would like to make comment, please identify yourself now.
Chair Hansen and members of the board, my name is Andrew Klein, and you've got me later in the agenda. I do have some other folks from industry here that may want to speak on the issue I'm speaking of. Is it okay if they speak at that point in time?
Yeah, that Pierre Sabat, Policy Analyst for the division. Mr. Klein, that is okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andrew and Pierre. Anyone else? It's getting close, Mark. It's getting close.
Hearing none, it's back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, are you ready for a program update?
Thank you, Chair Hansen and the board. Mark Heizer with Building Codes Division, Mechanical and Energy Engineer. Would like to give some of the program updates. One in particular is a mention that at the last Commercial Industry Energy Board, there was the announcement that the division will be looking to present the 2024 Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code, which will be using ASHRAE Standard 90.1 2022. Be presenting to the board, Construction Industry Energy Board this fall. Your representatives include Chair Hansen as the chair also of the Energy Board. There are copies of the standard available online to preview now. If you do have questions or want to bring up items to the SEB, now is the time to begin review of you can begin review of the upcoming energy code already. Possibly for some other future items are working on some interpretations for next code cycle, looking at low-rise versus high-rise residential buildings and energy recovery. We are continuing to follow the impacts of the recent Ninth Circuit Court ruling on federal preemption statutes. We're going to continue to watch. For those of you working across to the north, state of Washington is delaying their code adoption and actually are holding hearings right now on what they may need to do to address their code for compliance issues. And other items will come up later, but that's it for program updates on the mechanical program. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Okay. I appreciate that. At this time, we have no communications unless that has changed. And we have no appeals unless that has changed. And we apparently have no unfinished business because we are a efficient and good, productive board. New business. Do we have some recommendations to hear from the Oregon Residential Specialty Code or some activity from the Oregon Residential Specialty Code? And Pierre, will you introduce their discussions and recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair Hansen, members of the board. My name is Pierre Sabat, Policy Analyst with the Division. The Division is requesting the board's review of the mechanical provisions of the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code. Your board packet includes a document matrix that summarizes the mechanical provisions of this Oregon Residential Specialty Code for 2023. The division requests that the board reviews these provisions and consult with the division if there's any potential amendments to the current OMSC. And we also invite any feedback, discussions, comments, questions. Mark's here to answer questions. I think we have Tony on Zoom too if there's any questions for him. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Pierre. Mark, there's only a couple pages of these. I wonder if it's to the benefit of, I will wonder aloud and open this up for comment, Kevin and Ted and any of the board members. If we had Mark kind of go through this sort of line by line, would that be helpful? Some feedback.
Yes, that'd be helpful.
Yes, Chair, I think with the limited number that we have there, it shouldn't take too long just to get a brief explanation.
Thank you for the support. Are you prepared to do that, Mark? I know you are, but I like to ask.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. For the record, Mark Heizer with the division. And yes, I am ready to go over these items. I will do them in the order from the matrix here just to give some background on each of these. The first item having to do with anchorage of water heaters. Has been duplicate language between both the plumbing code and the mechanical provisions of residential and commercial. For the 2023 residential code, we're only referring to the plumbing code. That is where, so we don't have conflicting application of when a water heater is put in and the seismic strapping is put in. It's to the plumbing code, and so we don't have potential conflicting language between the ORSC and the OPSC. On mechanical ventilation, R303.4, noting that there's an acceptable substitute for local exhaust for kitchens. It aligns with really the low-rise and high-rise residential provisions that we have, that if you have a continuous exhaust from the kitchen, you can use a recirculating kitchen hood. In the residential code, there is also a request to have operable doors or windows to meet the natural ventilation requirements, so that if you do happen to burn your biscuits, you have a ability to open a window and have a higher rate of natural ventilation to clean the space out. R408.1 is a relative area where looking at the ventilation of crawl spaces and moisture control underneath. Some clarifying language about unvented crawl space was done. This might, sometimes there's some mechanical ventilation involved with those, so minor change there. Looking at, moving on to Chapter 11 for energy efficiency, there were a few minor changes, but primarily the revisions were so that the HVAC equipment efficiencies came both in HSPF 2 and SEER 2, which are the new federal metrics beginning this year for smaller residential equipment, as well as having the equivalent numbers in the old SEER and HSPF figures. On the installation of ducts, a few changes under N1105.3. There had been a previous exception for having ducts outside the thermal envelope of a arbitrary 5% of total length, which would be really hard to determine what that length was, to just going with 10 feet for that general exception of ducts that would be outside the thermal envelope. A little additional clarification on bringing ducts inside, in that it would be starting with the furnace and the ducts inside and some exceptions. One piece that comes in is that if you are going with ducts outside the thermal envelope and you're using the deeply buried path, it requires picking a second additional measure to make up for that loss in efficiency. Moving to the second page, N1105.3.1, there's, sort of jumped the gun on that one to cover that 2 additional measures for ducts outside. We are updating the technical bulletins to show the different paths for deeply burying ducts in the attic, when they're in a crawl space, or when the ducts are in an unvented crawl space that's inside the thermal envelope. One of the additional requirements is that thermostats will, for residential systems, are smart thermostats. This would be the newer variety that are Energy Star and have some form of either occupancy sensing or geofencing to be able to do sensing if people are home or not. We are working on probably having to do there's an exception for really what would be ductless mini split systems, which have variable speed compressors. We're going to have to put together an additional interpretation or alternate method to allow other larger systems with variable speed compressors to be exempted from this. Some of the systems require essentially manufacturers' thermostats that might not meet the full thermostat or might not be an Energy Star thermostat. There was a public proposal for ventilation fan efficiency. If you're using a central fan integrated system, i.e. using your furnace to draw in the outside air for your whole house ventilation, there's a minimum efficiency, fan efficiency delivery requirement. The net result of this is if you wish to use your furnace and not a dedicated fan for bringing in the outdoor air, that you probably will need to have a one of the ventilation controllers, and the furnace probably needs to be a multi-speed furnace so that when you're in ventilation mode, it's running on low speed, and probably the controller will be an intermittent controller. That's for 5.4.1.2 and 1105.6. As another note, what isn't on here is that we do have a new efficiency method using the energy rating index, which is really bringing in from the national code a HERS rating path, essentially in code, for an alternate compliance method. So that would allow a wider range of compliance paths. For the actual mechanical sections, it is very limited. There is a proposal that's come in that will be in the next model code about the use of factory-built combined intake termination fittings for whole house ventilation systems. Normally, an exhaust discharge needs to be 10 feet from a fan-powered intake. If you use one of these, this is an exception. If you're using a factory fitting that has sort of an exhaust outlet on top and an intake on the bottom, it doesn't have to have that 10-foot separation. So that's for some of these whole house ventilation systems. Some of these, if you'll see, it's just retained. We aren't going to go through those, but have new, better definition from model code of what a balanced ventilation system was brought in. Could make some items easier. If you moving on to Chapter 18, if there is someone who still has a oil-fired appliance, model code moved to require a blocked vent switch on the equipment similar to what's on your standard home furnace, so that if there is a problem with the ventilation, the vent, either the fan's not working well or flue is blocked, there is a safety switch required for oil-fired equipment. Under hydronic piping, just new, better language for, say, if you're a ground source heat pump loop, some additional language that's bringing in a lot of what we have in the commercial code and just making it easier to look at the piping systems of ground source heat pumps. Under fuel gas, the one big non-change is for threaded joint sealing. Yes, there is a threaded joints do need a joint sealer is really what was the change in the language, and it does need to be compatible with the pipe system. Previous language just described threaded joint sealers and not saying that you actually needed to use it. Fittings in concealed locations. Prior to this allowance, you really couldn't put a plugged, a cap and an end of a gas pipe inside of a wall without having access to it. So you're now able to, you cut off an old section that's not being used anymore, that can be in a concealed location. So caps and plugs are allowed to be in concealed locations now. And for through the wall vent terminal clearances, there is now a figure in the code to show where those are. That is the extensive scope of changes to mechanical for the 2023 ORSC. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment about smart thermostats. And at this point, this board is just to hear and be aware, I believe. Is that correct? Pierre and Mark, there's no motion. We're not approving any of this. We're just being aware that the Oregon Residential Specialty Code has done this.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Pierre Sabah, Policy Council of the Division. That is correct. There's no motion required. We are just asking the board to review the changes. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Only comment like I said, I do have a comment about smart thermostats. I'm not a big fan of smart thermostats because I'm a conspiracy theorist and I believe other data and other things are picked up and collected by smart thermostats. And I just have a fear of working smart thermostats into any code language. I like the idea of a smart thermostat and what it can do, but I don't like the other things that can come along with smart thermostats. But that's just me. But as the chair of the Oregon State Mechanical Board, I get to make those comments. So I have. Does anybody else have any comments about the actions of the Oregon State Residential Specialty Code?
Chair Hansen and members of the board, this is Andrew Klein. I'm a consulting engineer in the next state over in Washington, and I represent Chemours, who's a leading global manufacturer of refrigerants. When I'm talking next about the mechanical code, there are two standards which are also referenced in the residential code. Those are ASHRAE 34, which is the designation and safety classification of refrigerants, and UL 60335 Part 2-40, which is the standard to which electrical appliances such as heat pumps, air conditioners, and others are tested and listed. So I would ask the board when they submit their comments back on the residential code provisions dealing with mechanical that they ask that those two standards be updated to the 2022 editions of those standards to be in alignment with the 2024 code. Thank you.
Pierre and Mark, can you take that recommendation to review, please? That's a worthwhile recommendation. Andrew, thank you.
Chair Hansen, Pierre Sabah, Policy Council of the Division. Yeah, we will take that recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments or questions, board? Okay, we'll move on to Part B of new business. Andrew Klein is with us with some friends and family to propose a code amendment. This is information. This is informational and Andrew, yes, okay, I can go directly to you. I don't have to go through Pierre. I thought I might have to. Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hansen, members of the board. My name is still Andrew Klein, and I'm still a consulting engineer representing Chemours, a global leading supplier of refrigerant. In December of 2020, the U.S. Congress passed bipartisan legislation granting the EPA the authority to begin the phase down of HFCs under the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act, which you may know as the AIM Act. As part of the rule, manufacturers and importers of HFCs are limited in their capability to produce and import HFCs based on an allocation reduction schedule that was issued by the EPA. In addition to reducing supply, the EPA has also issued rules requiring manufacturers to convert to lower global warming potential refrigerants. Implementation dates vary. However, a majority of the applications will now rely on ASHRAE designated A2L refrigerants as early as January 1st, 2025. In addition to the federal measures, you also are probably aware of Oregon's legislation back in 2021. It was House Bill 3227, which prohibited the Department of Consumer and Business Services from outlawing in state building code certain uses of specific refrigerants authorized under federal law. So in advance of the federal rules and in conformance with that state legislation, Chemours is urging state officials to review and update state and local building codes to the most recently published model codes, which are the 2024 editions, to enable the use of lower global warming potential refrigerants. I provided two potential code changes, which align the state code with the 2024 model codes with respect to the lower GWP or global warming potential A2L refrigerants. The first option, only one of the options needs to be adopted, but the first one brings the code into alignment with the 2024 IMC verbatim, and that language was developed specifically by the ICC for early adoption by states. The other is an easier update that directs users to ASHRAE 15, which provides the same effect as the longer code change, but it's just a simpler approach that some of the other states have preferred. So given the upcoming regulatory deadlines, as well as the emergence of A2L equipment in the marketplace, these code amendments are critical to enable the transition to lower GWP refrigerants. Failure to update the state codes will effectively prohibit the installation of state-of-the-art equipment throughout the state and will inevitably lead to a shortage of equipment and materials to build new infrastructure, homes, and businesses. So Chemours has provided these proposals with the support of AHRI and other industry leaders, some of whom are on this call. So I'm available for any questions, and if anyone else would like to speak up, hopefully, Mr. Chair, you will permit that. Thank you.
I am going to permit that. Who would be the first?
Well, I guess I have more of a comment than anything, if I could, Chair Hansen. From the regulatory side, building official approach, we like to have things in the code. So having the 2024 standards adopted would be nice because it's there. That said, in the mid-cycle, adopting a different chart that's in the code is going to probably add some confusion to it, which would, in my mind, say that at least from a user standpoint, considering that it's going to be an engineer that's going to be looking at most of this anyway, if we just refer to the standard and the second approach that is given here, I think it would be sufficient to get us to the next code change where we could adopt the table, which may even change more by then. I don't know, the industry folks are here and might be able to speak to that a little bit more, but I guess my point on all of this is I think simpler is better. I think it's good that we recognize the other refrigerants out there, but just referring to the standard may be an easier approach at this point. I'm done.
I appreciate those comments. Thank you, Ted. As a user of the code, I like simpler is better also. Kevin, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. And to add to Ted's comment, ASHRAE Standard 15 2022 is available online for free. You can't print it, but you can preview it. So it's not a situation where you're requiring someone to buy an additional standard to access the code. They can find that free online.
Not everybody knows that, but thank you, Kevin. Yes, yes. Okay, Steven Spletzer. He's a chemist.
Spletzer, but close enough.
I'm sorry, Steven.
All good. The priest screwed it up at my wedding, so you're good.
Thank you.
Steven Spletzer with Chemours, manufacturer of low GWP refrigerant solutions. And I would agree with the take that a lot of times simpler is better. In addition to working for Chemours, I also volunteer with ASHRAE 15 and ASHRAE 15.2. I'm a voting member on both committees, and I'm also the chair of the General and Administrative Subcommittee of ASHRAE 15. And one of the things I can tell you is in the 2022 edition, we had more addenda or updates than any edition previously in history. In fact, I'm doing presentations on that at the ASHRAE conference next week. And I can tell you as a member of one of the subcommittees, we're on track with the next edition to have even more changes. There are already a number of addenda that have been published or proposed for 15 and 15.2. So by simply referring to the standard, you capture all of that, where putting all the language in now, some of that language may have changed with the addenda that are coming out or soon to come out as we speak. Thank you.
So what are you proposing, Stephen? To change the language just to refer to the standard and make it available as it evolves?
So what I was suggesting was similar to what other people said here, that the simpler approach, which is referring to ASHRAE 15, may be the preferred one.
Yeah.
Because the standard is, you know, regularly, it's a living, breathing document that's regularly being updated.
Ted, that doesn't jive with what you said specifically, though. Is that correct? Because just
Yeah, actually it does. One of the reasons I thought it better to refer to the standard is it's evolving and things are changing as we're going. So I like the fact of having the table in the code, but the whole point is it keeps changing. We're used to be that the code, you would reliably be able to go 3 years and not have to worry about every technology changing in the middle of it, and it's changing in the middle of it now. So the simpler approach from my point was to go to the standard instead of having it in a book, because A, we'd have the addendum that this is a change in the code that you'd have to refer out of the code to find it, and B, it may not even be up to date at that point. And from the regulatory side, we're going to be having most of this designed by engineers anyway, and just referencing the standard, they can do their calculations off the standard, and we know that it's the most up to date.
I got to get my head out of the residential. We were talking residential specialty code here, and I'm thinking of this as applied to the residential, and you're 100% right, Ted. Engineers are going to be identifying this equipment and matching it to code, so that makes perfect sense. Anybody else? Robert, I see a hand up from Robert Glass.
Yes, good morning. Robert Glass, Manager of State Regulatory Affairs with Daikin Comfort Technologies. I definitely support the proposals that Andrew has put forward, and in particular with the discussion about the simplistic proposal on moving forward. It's something that many states that have already done the adoption of these standards and updating these standards have taken that simplistic approach. I mean, that includes Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, North Dakota, Connecticut, Utah, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Ohio. So it's something that now we've also run into some states that they want the verbatim every dot and tittle from ICC to go ahead and update the codes. And so ICC has created documents that allow jurisdictions to update using everything that will be in the 2024 IMC. The other proposal that Andrew put forward again is a simplistic version that the industry believes that if those are addressed in the codes, then that will allow for A2L equipped product for both HVAC and refrigeration. So it's something that is being done, using the simplistic version is being done by many jurisdictions and states across the country. And we believe that it's acceptable until it gets to a point where the 2024 ICC codes or later are addressed by the code bodies for adoption. Then at that point, then everything that we're doing now would be included in the 2020. Appreciate your consideration of these things and urge the board to go ahead and move forward with these proposals, very much needed for the HVAC and refrigeration industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Andrew, do you have any other friends and family that would like to contribute?
No, that's all that I see on here. I appreciate you giving everyone an opportunity to speak. And yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. So no additional comments. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much, Andrew. Mark, do you have some details on SAM 2101 that you would like to present to us beyond what already has been?
Chair Hansen, for the record, Mark Heizer with the division. Yes, the simplified version for updating SAM 21-01, but we would recommend, yes, updating to, if the proponents here who are testifying, of updating to ASHRAE standards 15 and 34-2022 to align, to get that jump. And currently it's saying to update to the 2019 version. So yes, that would be one thing. And yes, the more detailed code changes that are coming in the 2024 model codes, the IMC and IBC, we would recommend probably waiting on that, because there are some building code related items that are in those that would need some coordination with other boards. The structural board, there's some fire life safety issues that come out with the updated code. And yes, the update on the SAM to make sure that the right standards and reference years are available would be something that the division could take care of and present at the next meeting for.
The next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we will have some unfinished business at the next meeting to get back to. Gosh darn it. Okay. Please take those additional actions to review that information and create an alternate method or interpretation. I appreciate that, Mark, and all of the staff. Do any of the other board members have any other further questions or comments or announcements? Andrew, I'm sorry. Andrew, your hand's still up. Is it up for a reason?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Mr. Heizer and comment that, yes, the 2022 additionist standards is what we as an industry would like. If you go in the packet to the what we called the simpler approach, I'm not sure which PDF page it's on, but it's after the messy looking one. That does look like it's got all the correct additions there. You can double check that, Mr. Heizer, but it looks like that is correct. So thank you.
All right. I'm moving to adjournment. So this is your last chance. Does anybody have any other comments or questions that they would like to offer? Okay. So just with that correction of the minutes from the last meeting, Kevin Duell did not, in fact, receive passes from Dan Fouts in the early 70s for the Ducks. And with that being clarified, being no further business for the meeting, I will call this meeting adjourned at 10:18 a.m. on June 21st, 2023.